Welcome to Real Talk Christian Podcast, where we drink coffee and have conversations about faith, culture, and society. I'm Chris Fuller.
And this is Mark Hyde.
And on today's episode, we will be talking about Bible translations. Are they important? Which ones should we read? And why does it matter? Mark, you ready?
Let's go.
What's going on, Mark?
Fuller.
Thanks. I appreciate you letting me do the intro for once.
Letting you, bro. It was my honor. It was my privilege.
It's challenging.
Because you're like, and you gotta get it out. And you're not quite sure. It also doesn't help that we're sitting in a room that's 80 degrees right now.
Man, it's a little, bro. I cannot wait for fall when we can open the windows.
So hot in this. I mean, we're in my 3 seasons room that has terrible insulation.
If you look at my face, it's like all red, and that's what happens when I get hot and sweaty. I just start getting beet red. But whatever, you know.
I'm gonna keep all inappropriate comments away tonight.
I'm blushing.
You're blushing
constantly.
just being on the podcast. But how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing real good. Mark, how you doing?
You know, I'm actually doing pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm trying to honestly figure out life. I have been to, technically 3 states in the last week, I guess. 4, because I was in Illinois, I was in Wisconsin, I was in Ohio, and back in South Bend all in the course of 8 days.
Spreading the COVID like Christmas cheer.
Yep, and picking up used cars for a buddy of mine. I was the second driver, so we went all over the dang place looking for cars. So I'm doing good, man.
Awesome.
It's been busy trying to figure out this new season of life.
Right.
With what does it mean to not be...
What's it mean to be a single parent, non-pastor, and a business owner? That's a lot. That's a lot to figure out.
But I've had a lot of good conversations that have stemmed from it, dude. So I'm really excited. So if you're listening and your church's graphics are terrible and you all need a church's new website,
give your boy Mark Hyde a call.
Speaking of websites, as of date of recording, I'm just a few, maybe a week from launching the official RTC website. Because this is not just like basic Squarespace. I actually custom made this one.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited.
So a lot of back end stuff where you can find the whole library, you can read reviews, you can order the merch, you can do whatever you want. Right. So I'm excited. And you can text us, you can call us, you can find all of our stuff at this one website.
Awesome.
So
it's going to have our phone number. So if you forget it, even though we say it so many times, 574-400-5352.
Say that again.
574-400-5352.
And that is literally one of the easiest and I think funnest, most fun. I don't know.
The funniest, most funnest.
Are the grammar people out there in the world?
Yeah, probably.
But it's a fun way to contact us. You know, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We have a lot of people who have reached out to us. We have a lot of new listeners actually that have reached out to us on Instagram and Facebook. Right. So our RTC family is growing, which is super cool. But you know what's not growing? Our reviews on Apple iTunes.
No reviews?
Nope. Nothing.
Shame.
Nothing. Which means people don't know we exist.
I mean,
okay, granted, Spotify is now starting to take over our listening platforms, which you can't leave a review on Spotify.
That's true.
But you can share it with your peoples. You can share it with your friends and let people know if this content is helpful. I think that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty dope.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
We actually sold our first sweatshirt on our merch store. So someone's getting ready for fall, so we sold our first sweatshirt.
Janelle, was that you?
It actually wasn't Janelle. It did not say it was Janelle.
Awesome.
It was not Janelle, actually. But so if people want to know information about the store, they can go to Facebook, and all the links are there. But Instagram is probably the easiest place to find the links for the store. But that's the best way to support for right now. Because pretty soon we'll have the actual
website where you just click the link, and there you are.
Rolling.
Go shopping.
So, Mark, I love it, man.
What are we drink? Today is a kind of a special brew day.
Today is a special brew.
Because it was sent by a listener.
It was sent to us from the one and only Mark Hyde. Just kidding. I didn't do this coffee.
From the Mark Hyde. It was sent from a listener, though.
It was sent from a listener. If you might remember episode 39, Beth Schneider, she seems to pop up in our conversations. Her and Joe Frericks. Joe Frericks seems to pop up quite a bit, too. But, last time we drank coffee that Joe got us from Peru. This time, Beth sent us some coffee from a local coffee shop down in Knoxville.
We couldn't drink Joe's coffee because it would keep us both up all night.
Oh, my goodness, dude.
That's a morning-only coffee.
I would say that's more like after a hearty, like during a hearty breakfast. You know what I'm talking about?
right after would be good.
That's what I'm saying. You had like some good pancakes, some bacon, and maybe an omelet. And then that coffee after that that'd be good.
Definitely.
But we're drinking a Guatemalan blend, if I remember.
It was
right. It was Guatemalan from a local coffee shop down in Knoxville, Tennessee, that Beth sent us, which is where she's from. So, Beth, if you're listening, thank you for the coffee. And if you want to send us coffee, just shoot us a DM, and I'll send you one of our addresses, probably his, so that way you're not creeping on me and then killing me in my sleep. But
I mean, he is single, but I
mean, it's true, but
you might get shot. My wife's pretty good. She hears everything.
So if you're gonna break into a house, break into the person that literally doesn't wake up for beans.
Yeah,
like I don't wake up for anything. So it's
my house should
fun.
get shot.
But your house will get shot. But either way, dude, we're sitting in an 80-degree room.
I'll do it out of love, though.
We're sweating like crazy.
Yeah,
we're drinking hot coffee from Knoxville, Tennessee.
But
it's good. So, what do you think about this one though, in comparison to some of the other roasts that we've had over the last year?
It's pretty good.
You're more of a coffee snob than I am. So I'm going to hear your
It's
your
not
opinion.
bad. It's not bad. I thought, I'm very partial to my own roast because I roast it the way I like it, but it's not bad. It's pretty good. I would drink it again.
I would. Okay, it's hard because you can't really say this is my favorite one because it's like you can't say you have a favorite child. I mean, you can say you have a least favorite, Folgers. You can say you have a least favorite child, but I don't think you can say you have like a most.
What's that
favorite.
one that Walmart sells? 8 o'clock or whatever. What is it? 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, or whatever.
8 o'clock coffee. Yeah.
Anyways.
Yeah. Anywho, but either way, if you want to send us coffee, let us know, and we'd love to hook you up with that. Well, David, I'm excited about today's conversation.
Yeah, me too, man.
Hopefully, this won't be a long one.
We're gonna try to keep it. I don't know what we're at. Oh, we're at 7 minutes and 15 seconds.
Can we keep it under 30?
We're gonna
we can keep an episode under 30
We're
minutes?
going to shoot for 30, which if we shoot for 30, that means we'll probably hit over 40. But we're going to shoot for under 30.
We're going to shoot for under 30? Okay. How about this? If we shoot under 30, we'll revisit some of the names that put their name into the drawing. Maybe we'll send them. Oh, we already done. We're doing mini swag bags.
You know what?
We're out of
you
stuff.
know what? Here's the thing. If we can keep it under 30 minutes, which means 22 minutes from now, if we can keep it down 22 minutes and exit out at 30 minutes, we will pick a random follower on either Instagram or Facebook to send them a little bit of coffee. Just saying.
I like it. So that means we got pressure is on.
Let's get going.
Let's go.
I want to send somebody some coffee.
So let's do it. All right, buddy, set us up.
All right, so we're talking about Bible translations. There's a lot of people. Man, I'd like auctioneer. All right, here we go now. $5 here.
You're so excited about this one.
I hear there's a lot of conversations that go on, and I hear a lot of Christians bickering back and forth of what translation is the best Bible. This is the Bible, and this is the only Bible. And I'm going to just I read this version, but I'm going to say it out there because I hear it so often about this version. It's King James only, and that's the only way to go.
Because that's what Jesus used. Not really.
That's
not really.
That's what Jesus used.
That's what Jesus used.
So, but yeah, so I hear this all the time, and it's like it pricks my mind a little bit because we'll get into it in a sec. But let's go over how many different types of versions or languages there is in the Bible. Mark, did you know as of October 2019, the full Bible has been translated into 698 languages. Yep. The New Testament has been translated into an additional 1,558 languages, and portions of the Bible and stories into 1,138 other languages. So we're looking at over 3,000 different translations, either languages or versions.
And it's, I think, the most translated piece of literature, like to date, if I remember right.
It's definitely the best seller. I know that for sure. The Bible is the best seller. So.
Yep. Sorry, I'm looking, as you can see me scrolling if you're on video, I'm looking for a very specific post that people have posted a lot about King James that has caused a lot of conversations.
Okay. Easy there, guy. Easy there. Don't be talking bad about the King Jimmy, okay? King Jimmy is our friend, and I'll explain why in a bit, or you can explain why. It doesn't matter.
More just of why people get, like, they're always posting about, this version does this, so,
But I mean,
I think it's let's
go
into it.
Yeah, let's talk about, the big question that I always hear is, So which one are the ones that I should be reading? That's the one. Like, I don't know which one to read. You guys, I hear everybody saying, well, it's this version, it's this version, it's this version.
And everyone says
Which
this
ones?
version is like the best version. Like,
Right.
oh, you need to read this one.
Right.
And then when you go into the Bible app, there's like the entire list.
Yeah, it
like,
goes
what
on.
do you do?
And especially if you pay for it, the paid app, on and on.
Oh, even the
and
free
on.
one from Life Church.
Right.
But,
So, I mean, the main thing, though, is like, whenever I get this question, here's my answer. Here's my answer from now on.
from now on, okay.
I've done a lot more studying recently, and this is my answer from now on. Before, it was similar to this answer, but this is my new answer. My new.
The new fullest answer.
Yeah, my fuller answer.
There you go.
So my new answer is obviously, reading the text in the original language is the best route. Why? Because there's certain words in the Hebrew text and the Greek text that do not translate over to English or any other language. They just don't.
And that's fact, even like with English to Spanish.
To Spanish,
like, French.
Exactly. It's one of those things during a translation, there is no way to fully translate it. And even if you do, we have to understand the culture behind the translation. Because if Mark over here said, yo, dude, that was dope. I mean,
I'm not talking about drugs.
He's
not talking about drugs.
He's not talking about the stuff that you put on fabric airplanes to solidify the wings. It's called doping.
Or pipe dope.
Or pipe dope. Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's not what he's referring to. So you have to understand the culture of when he's using this. So there's two things. You got to understand the language and you got to understand the culture that it was written in. Those are the two things. So if you can't do that, you're not going to get an accurate, like 100% translation. You're just not. And no version out there is 100%. None. It's not the King James. It's not the NASPA. It's not the NLT. It's not the NIV. It's not the ESV. It's not.
No one has a corner market on.
Yeah, it's
perfect translation.
So now we have to look at, okay, well, then what do we do? Well, I say, whatever Bible, first of all, leads you to Jesus, that's the Bible you should read. Whatever's easiest for you to read and understand the gospel story, that's the one you should start with.
Yeah, mine's just kind of similar. Mine is always, the teams will be like, oh, what Bible should I get, Mark? I'm like, well, I mean, I teach from this one. Pastor Scott teaches from that one, so that's whatever. But whatever one you read, it's probably the best translation.
For you at the time.
As long as you're reading the scriptures. I mean, if we believe that the word of God is actually living and breathing and active, who are we to say that a translation can't be used by God? Because, that's the NIV, so obviously you can't be saved from that translation.
Definitely.
Which I've heard. I've actually heard that preached in the pulpit.
I have too.
So
I have too, very many times. Now, are there some translations that I would say probably steer clear of? In my opinion, yes. There are some. There's some I would steer clear of.
Right.
But if they've got the salvation message, then I would say if you're a new believer or you're thinking about coming to Christ, that's the one you should start with. Whatever one is easiest for you to read. And then after that, now it depends on what you want to do from there.
Right, definitely. I think that's what it's. What do you want to do with your stuff?
Right, yep. And so I'm just going to go over a couple of the, if I can get my tablet to work here, I'm just going to go over a couple of the different translations and kind of where they're, and these aren't all of them. They're not even close to all of them, and some places have different orders for where they're actually ordered. So I'm not going to order them as best to worst in this category. I'm just going to say it as they're in this category.
Yep, that's good.
And so for the for word, all right, as closest translation as you can have in another language, word for word, you have the interlinear Greek, Hebrew, English Bible. Okay, so that's taking the Greek and the Hebrew, Greek New Testament, Hebrew Old Testament, and it's translating to the best of our ability to translate a word exactly as best they can from that original text. Right. Now, again, there's not words that can be translated. So those words, and depending on which interlinear Bible you get, may not have anything for translation, or it may have like some sort of way to signal that, hey, this is what we believe the translation word would be.
Right, that makes sense.
So you have that. You have the NASB, the NASPA, the New American Standard Bible. Now, this one is claimed to be the most accurate word-for-word translation.
That's readable.
That's right. That's understandable.
That's understandable. But yeah, and this is one like John MacArthur uses this one. I know a lot of other people who use this one as well.
Right.
Because like I actually read a word for word translation, and it
doesn't
fit the English sentence right. So you have to basically they just take the words and then re-put them back into the sentence.
Right. Right, yeah, and maybe have some filler words from what they believe that word would be translated from.
Right.
Similar to the KJV a little bit.
But I would say more similar to the ESV.
Very close to the
ESV.
ESV, and then so very ESV, English Standard Version. KJV's King James, in case people don't know what
we
we're
call
saying.
it the King Jimmy.
I'm trying not to be Christianese here.
Yep.
So, but actually the ESV and the New King James Version, because the King James crowd corrected a lot of the mistakes from the King James of the translation, and then they came out with the New King James Version, which made it easier to read, but also corrected some of the translational errors.
Right.
And that lines up pretty close with the ESV now.
And when you say cleaned it up, what do you mean by cleaned it
so,
up?
like, there's Paul and I were just discussing this the other day.
Paul Lindgren, in case people want to know. Our boy Paul Lindgren.
Yeah, so we were just discussing this the other day about there's a scripture in, I'm trying to think of where it's at, which one it was. There's been a lot of study going on. I think it's 1 Thessalonians 4.
Okay.
And it talks about
the day of the Lord.
It talks about end of the world in the King James, but in the NASB, the New American Standard, it says end of the age.
And all other translations say age.
Well,
right?
not everyone.
No?
There are a few that say end of the world, but since then, the New King James version has switched over to the end of the age, because in the context of the original manuscripts, age fit more with that. Now, what age meant back in that culture, we can speculate at this point.
We can have that conversation.
We're 2,000 years removed, and so we got to take the closest things we can think about. But that's another conversation for another day.
Yep.
So those are considered,
the end of the world as we know it.
Those are considered the most trusted word-for-word translations. Okay, now if we're going for thought, here's a list of 10 that I found. 10 of them that are kind of pretty trusted. So there's Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version, the New American Bible, the New International Version, which I didn't know this, but I just learned this. Wayne Grudem. I don't know if our listeners know who Wayne Grudem is, but he's the author of Systematic Theology. Did you know he had a hand in writing the
2011 version?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought I didn't know that. So it was interesting to hear that.
Yep.
The NIRV, the New International Reader Version, the New Jerusalem Bible, the Revised English Bible, the Common English Bible, the New Living Translation Bible, and God's Word Translation. Those are the closest thought for thought. So you read a sentence and you got a thought process from that. These are,
and then they interpret it for you, and they make interpretive decisions based off that. Because if a word means 3 different things, the NASB will just leave it vague. Right. Whereas like NIV will choose a direction, which could be wrong, whatever.
Right.
Or the idea of, wash our sins as white as snow.
Right.
Well, what do you do for someone in the desert who's never seen snow?
Right. What is snow? And we know what snow was, but them probably back then,
or
in that
like
culture,
these tribes down in the rainforest.
Right. They probably don't know what snow is. But anyways, so we're going to move on. So that was the top 10 of the thought for thought. And now we're going to the paraphrase. Now, Mark and I had a little discussion about the paraphrase before we got on, about how we see a little bit different. I try to stay personally away from the paraphrased. I've still got the list in here, but I still try to stay away from it. Because so many people mistakenly read it as a study Bible. And like Mark pointed out to me, which is very true, when you read it, if you read the introduction, hey, we got something wrong with our stuff. But anyways, if you read the introduction, it tells you that this is not supposed to be a study Bible. Some of these translations say that it's not supposed to be a study Bible. And so I agree with you. If they read the introduction, don't use it as a study Bible. Don't take it as like, this is what we should only learn from, and these are the scriptures we should hide in our heart.
Right.
And
I don't know if all of them say that, but I know specifically, like from the list, I know the message will be in there. That was one from Eugene Peterson.
Right.
I love Eugene Peterson. I have his books. I've studied his sermons. I love Eugene Peterson.
But typically, most mature Christians would not go and pick up a paraphrased Bible and say, this is what I'm going to use to study.
No, and most people aren't nerds like me and read the introductions. Like I read an introduction to a Bible and go, what's the purpose of this thing? Why did they write it? And Wayne Grudem says, there's other ones out there. If you're going to study the Bible, and he even says, if you're going to preach it, which is funny, 'cause a lot of pastors do. He's like, I just want people to fall in love with just sitting and reading. That's why there's no verses in there. That's why it's just a letter. Like he's trying to rewrite it as if it was just, sitting down and reading a narrative or a book in that regard. But when it comes to actually studying it, he goes, no, there's other better ones out there.
Right.
So for me, I use it as a commentary because
Right.
those are his thoughts and opinions on what this text is supposed to mean, which is what all commentaries are.
Right.
They give you your opinions on
But
things.
most Christians wouldn't think that, I'm going to pick up a commentary and read the commentary along with it. Like when I was a new believer, I never read a commentary.
No.
It wasn't until I wanted to dig deeper into God's word that I was like, I'm going to read a commentary to see what they think it's saying. And usually the commentators are the ones who've done the cultural research and the word for word translations
Right,
research.
and to bring it in a little bit too, when we talk about commentaries, is when people are like a sports commentator, they're talking about what's happening.
They're explaining
what's going on. That's what these commentators do. Is they look and say, okay, what are all the literary historical contexts?
And
what is
there's-
this trying to describe?
and some commentators are better than others.
Yeah.
Just like in the sports world.
Just like in the podcast world, some podcasts are better than others.
Yeah. We're looking at this camera now, by the way, Mark.
Oops, I'm looking at the wrong camera.
Because something's going on and it's not letting me switch over anymore.
Okay, I got you.
But the paraphrase, I'll go through the paraphrase while you're fixing that. But the paraphrase, top 5 on the list of the most trusted paraphrase would be the Living Bible, the Message Bible, the Good News Bible, today's English version, and easy to read version. So those are the those are the 3 categories. And there's a lot more.
So I guess my
different
question
translations.
is, I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but as a listener sitting and listening to all of that, I go, okay, what on earth am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah, there's so many. It's so extensive.
And I do want to say this because we're not going to get into the weeds of this conversation.
We can't, especially because we're down to 9 minutes before we got to
right.
end.
And I'll link this in the show notes.
So you
But
gotta
there's a
hurry.
podcast called Christ, Culture, and Coffee. They went on like they're 8 episodes deep into talking about the formation of the Bible. How do we get the Bible? Which translation should we use?
Right.
And so we're talking like 8-9 hours of content that
Right.
they have produced so far, and we're not doing that.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah, what should we do?
I think the best thing to do is to do the research for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What are you looking for? And based on what you're looking to do, how much study you're looking to do, what part of studying are you looking to do, should base it on what you should probably get. If you still don't know, I would look at what your local church is reading. We talked
good.
about
Yeah.
this. We talked
what's your
about
pastor preaching
Yeah,
out
what's
of?
your pastor preaching out? Because if you can follow along with him, that's a good start. But I kind of want to hear your thoughts on what's your top 5. I only want 5.
Oh, top
of your
5.
versions that you tend to fall back on, and maybe a quick reason why.
So my main Bible is called the Christian Standard Bible. That's the main Bible that I used. The Holman was the first version. Christian Standard was the updated. And the reason why I go for that one is they went for something called optimal equivalency, which is just a big fancy word for best of both worlds, where they wanted to take the best of literal translation, but then also with actually able to read it. So they tried to be the most readable. When I found, even when I would teach teenagers, this is where it came out of, we would read it. I wouldn't need to spend the next 10 minutes telling you, no, this word doesn't mean what it used to mean. This word doesn't mean what it used to mean. This word doesn't mean what it used to mean. Like I grew up being taught under the King James, and
Right.
Which is funny that I love how people are so hard-nosed about the King James when you read the intro again. When you read the intro to the new,
You're the only
King
person I've
James,
ever heard of that reads the intro.
the author, the translators, all they said was the final product was meant to be used for public and popular consumption. In other words, even James said, use the common vernacular so that everyone can read this.
Right.
But now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to keep this because this is the inspired version, even though we don't say.
It's not the
90%
inspired
of these
English
words.
version from Thou Saveth
No,
the King.
and they even said that this is a translation. There's other good ones out there, the Geneva Bible and all these other ones. This one is just what caught on storm. But what's interesting,
This is the one that was the first one that was publicly widespread,
Right. Now,
from Latin to
it is
English.
a literary masterpiece, no
Oh, yeah.
question. I'm never going to say it's not. If
Right.
people want to use it, I'm not against it. In fact, most of the translations,
I
most
use
of the
it.
verses that I've learned over my lifetime are King James.
Yeah.
Like it's just that's what I grew up doing.
In the beginning was the Word.
But I would sit through when I was in college. The pastor used the King James, and we would have youth group for only like an hour. But during that literally 20-minute teaching time, half of it was explaining what the verse was trying to say into words that these kids could understand. And I'm like,
Right.
I'm not wasting 10 minutes of my time doing. Why don't we just find a Bible that works and it reads well? And the CSB I really liked as I started reading it. So I just like that it's easy to read, but it's also it holds very tight to a literary structure and
Right.
on top of that. And they have notes. They have tons of little notes where it's like, oh, other translations say this, other translations say this.
Yeah.
So it doesn't just say like the NIV. This is just what it is, but it actually says it. So that's my top one. Second one is actually it's funny. It's the New King James is.
It's
the one.
easier to read.
I actually had to take a test. Not a test. It was a project in college. They just gave us 15 translations. Hey, which one was the easiest for you to understand? Some obscure text that I've never read.
Right.
New King James was number one on that list before Holman and before CSB. New King James was number one.
Gotcha.
I like the ESV. I think it's one of the great ones out there. The way my mind thinks, I have a hard time interpreting it. Like I actually have to think harder on what is this actually trying to say.
Right.
Whereas I know a lot of people will just say, yeah, I get it. I fully understand it. One of my favorite ones to just read, though, is the New Living Translation. I'd say that's probably my favorite one.
Okay.
That's 4, because ESV I'd bring
okay.
four.
Okay.
So
gotcha. Number 4.
NLT, and then
number 4.
and then the last one, people are going to hate me for because a lot of people don't like this, but I actually am totally okay with the NIV. There's things in there.
And that's our show for
There's things in there that I think, okay, I see why they did it.
Right.
I understand their reasonings. I think there's some things I'm like, I wouldn't have gone that route. But the thing that's beautiful about the NIV is it just reads really well. I trust the translators that did it. I don't agree with everything. Like they took out
They took out some major verses.
They took out some, but at the same time, though,
that's because they paraphrased the line. They gave a thought that tied in a couple verses, but they missed.
And that's why I'm
missed
like,
the thought.
And that's why it's so hard when you say top 5. I'm like, well, I use the CSB, but if you want to use now, I like the NLT, but I don't think a pastor should be preaching out of the NLT.
An NLT is a
New Living Translation.
Yeah.
A lot of youth pastors preach out of that one.
I used it a lot, but I use it for the thought for thought. That's what I always. Well, we're not going into what.
Well, it's a good one because we've been in a small group and we're like, man, this verse just sounds weird. Okay, Bethany, you have an NLT. Read what you have, and it's like, okay, that makes more sense, and that's why I like the Message because I'm like, I'll be reading things. I'm like, this is weird. I read the Message, and there's actually been times where I'm like, yeah, that's not what it's trying to say. Let's try again. But there's other times where it's
Let's try the NIV.
It's like, okay, that's really cool in that.
Right.
So, and that's what they say in a lot of Bible study. Have multiple translations. But for me, when I'm reading, I actually read out of it's called the Ancient Faith Study Bible. So all the notes are
pretty
from
cool.
church fathers like Origen and John Chrysostom.
Yeah, I was looking through. You had it out on your table when I got here, and I was looking through it. It was pretty cool.
Me and Soshay got them at the same day.
Yeah.
Yep. So, those are the ones I do.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to give you my top 5 real fast.
Go for it.
Real quick, because we're down. You took a lot of time. I got 3 minutes.
Sorry.
All right. So my first one is the NASB, the New American Standard Bible. Again, it's more word for word accurate. I like that. That's what I use. Number 2, something I just purchased. It's actually not even at my house yet, but I've been reading a lot from the internet version, is the Complete Jewish Study Bible. The translation gives you more of a thought-for-thought translation, but from a Jewish perspective of the culture. So I'm really getting into really wanting to understand the culture and when it was written. The next one is like you. Number 3 would be the New King James Version. I definitely like it, even though I do love my KJV and it's well respected. I do like the New King James Version. My next one, just like you, is the New Living Translation, the NLT. I read that one all the time because it's just nice. It's like nice when you just want to read something and not think. And mine's a study NLT, so it's got some really good commentary in it. So that's why I love that.
I've seen some cool parallels too with that.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then my number 5 would be the Interlinear Hebrew, Greek, English Bible. I have a couple of those apps on my phone. And when I'm wanting to really dig into it, and they have the Strong's Concordance with the words, so you can really dig into it big time. So those are mine. Coming up quick here. So just
I feel like we should give coffee no matter what.
Oh no, we're keeping another 30 minutes. So I had written down some examples of how to read some of these, but look them up for yourself. I don't want to give you just my version. Okay. So passages are always a little slightly different. Again, just do what you believe. If you're wanting to do more study for word accurate, I would say interlinear, NASB, New King James. If you want to, that's just my thoughts.
Yeah.
If you want to do more thought for thought, I would say like the NLT, the Jewish Study Bible. Just those are my thoughts on it.
I kind of wish we can go into this because there's a lot of people who think the NIV, the CSB, all these modern translations actually have removed verses. Because that's something I was looking for. Because King James will say, have something, and then people are like, oh, the NIV is this. I can't believe they're taking verses out of the Bible.
Well,
and it's
okay.
But that's
right.
understanding.
I wasn't going to read it, but I'm going to read it now because we're not going to hit the 30-minute mark. We're close.
Sorry, we got close, but we can't do it.
So I'm going to go ahead and read this, and maybe we'll try the next time. Our listeners are like, dang it. And we still may draw
We tried.
name, but
We might draw a name.
I'm just going to read from those 5 translations in the order: the NASB, the CJB, which is the Complete Jewish Bible, the New King James Version, the NLT, and the Interlinear, how it reads. Okay?
Yeah, let's do it. I think that'd be cool.
It all has, this is all the same scripture. It's all Genesis 1 through 3, and I picked that because it's pretty well known of how that goes.
Yeah.
If you've been a Christian, it doesn't matter if you're only been a Christian for a week. I mean, it's the beginning of the Bible, so hopefully you've stumbled across this one, or else you haven't probably been reading.
Well, now you're going to know. Now you're going to know.
So the NSB says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
That would be the most accurate word for English translation, according to all the research that I've done.
Right, yep.
So here's the CJB, the Complete Jewish Study Bible. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was unformed and void. Darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit God hovered over the surface of the water. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So what was there a big difference?
No. I mean, there was...
I didn't see a big difference either.
I think that the only difference was surface of the deep versus face of the deep.
And hovered. I think.
Oh, it's because NASB says moving over.
Right.
Versus hovering.
And the Spirit of God and the Spirit of God. Yeah, so it's just hovered, I think. So New King James Version says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So that was kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah.
that was a pretty good mix of both of those. NLT says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and empty, and darkness covered the deep waters, which is different than what we just read. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So it was a little different, but very similar.
And even my CSB is a little different. I mean, because it talks about in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light.
Yeah.
But in all these, they're all, I mean, there's little nuances that are slightly different.
But they all mean the same. And even here's the interlinear, right? This is the interlinear Bible. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. So
it's there.
If you guys can find some sort of mystical, major difference in what that was saying, I will be stupefied.
And that's it. And I mean, I don't have it in front of me. I wasn't quite prepped for this part, but there's a research that was done out there to see, okay, we talk about, okay, what translation do we do? A lot of that conversation goes back to the Greek text. And I have
Greek for New Testament.
Greek and Hebrew, the original.
Right.
And, there's a Facebook
or Aramaic.
Or Aramaic, thank you. Yeah, because of Daniel and some of Ezekiel. But
some of Jeremiah, too.
Oh, I read Jeremiah, yep. But there's a Facebook friend I have who is what we call super fundy. If there was such a thing as a superhero, he would have the crest.
Super fundy.
And he's dropping all this different stuff about the King James and how there's the Greek and Hebrew and all this modern majority text are they're, even though they're older, they're not really older and they're taking out scripture. And it was just these German people who were trying to ruin Christianity. They weren't even real Christians who did all these different things, which is honestly the only people who believe that are those who want to choose to believe that.
Right.
But, we have different Greek, specifically Greek, because Hebrew is pretty consistent, but we have multiple different Greek manuscripts that are going to different camps based on age versus what the manuscripts say, all these different things. And in those, we see some things that are in it versus something that are not. Like the end of Mark is not in the oldest manuscripts, but it's in the newer ones. Some people think that, they didn't have Bibles, they passed scrolls around, so they added that to Mark so that way it had the complete story.
Every
from Matthew.
Scroll that we have in existence today, even back during the time of King Jimmy, was all a copy. It was not the original manuscript.
Right.
It's all a copy because that's the way it was all handwritten by scribes. Now, granted, it was an honor.
It was
and a
meticulous.
scary. It was a very scary thing because if you were a scribe and you messed up, remember back in them days they put people to death.
Right.
So
and even like with King James, like there's like the mess up Bibles where
Right.
they actually put thou shalt
Right.
have adult, like thou shalt not commit adultery. It says thou shalt commit adultery. Like there's the error Bible.
Right.
I actually saw that King James fined them like
and
for
destroy them.
everything for what they're worth because
Right.
and that's English. That's not the scribes who took it upon themselves. That was their only mission in life was
Right.
to do this. But whenever you see all these differences, that's what's cool about all of the various manuscripts that we have is all the differences that you find. People are like, oh, since there's differences in all the manuscripts, you can't trust it. Well, every single difference has nothing to do with doctrinal things.
Doctrinal things.
Oh, I say doctrinal. I'm sorry. That's just I say weird words. But But with when it comes to doctrine of who is Jesus,
Right.
who is God, what are we supposed to do as Christians? Everything that has the doctrine. Yeah, I say doctrinal, but it's okay. Like I don't know,
We still love you,
whatever.
Mark.
Everyone. Oh, I hope so. I hope so. But we have all these differences in the translations,
Right.
but they don't change what the actual message of the Bible
But
is.
I mean, you look at that, okay, but we know
And we have more manuscripts of this than any other book in the history of
Right.
the world.
But we know in the 4th century, the early churches in the 4th century, later in the 4th century, came together to canonize the Bible.
Correct.
Right? Canonize means to solidify, to look at
Just
all
the
these
rule.
to
Yeah.
all these manuscripts, find out which ones were actually true, had an associate, it was either came from a disciple or was associated closely, was a disciple of a disciple.
Right.
And
Yep.
those are the ones that they canonized and said, this is the Holy Scripture for the New Testament.
Mhm.
Now, the Old Testament was already canonized by Israel
Israel. Yep.
back during the time before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Yep.
So it's very important to understand that these scrolls that we're getting were canonized, and most of the scrolls we got handed down to get the King James, the Latin before the King James, it came from the early church fathers who canonized the Bible and tried to protect it, which during that time, the church was a state institution because of Constantine
Right.
in the early 4th century.
Right.
And so that was back before the fall of Rome and all this. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast. But so we have to understand that none of these scrolls were original. But it's funny because we had these scrolls passed down. We got the King James written. And in 1948, we discovered something in the Middle East that was very fascinating.
The Dead Sea Scrolls?
The Dead Sea Scrolls. The caves. I think they're up to 14 or 15 caves they found with these scrolls, these manuscripts that carbon date back 2,000 years.
Like
to
they
right
are
after the time of Christ.
Crazy early.
And it's believed that they were gotten out of Jerusalem because of the Israel's war with Rome. They were put into hiding. That's what's believed, that these manuscripts and they were taken to these caves.
It's so dry,
And-
it preserved.
It preserved them, right? So it's
And that's
interesting.
just it. Like, there's so many more with this conversation. And, with this short conversation, we're not trying to build a case for the New Testament. We're not trying to build a case for these things.
Right.
But it's more of when it comes to translations, there's some people who are on the camp of like, I don't know where to start. It sounds like for you and me, I would say the top 3 for us are the NLT, and then for you from there, the NASB, and for me, the Christian Standard Bible. Like those are kind of our,
And then the NKJV.
the New King James. I mean, they're
Kind
all
of in the
good. And that's the
middle.
thing is, it's the fact of, I don't think someone should be ashamed of what translation they use.
Oh, no.
And they're going to be
And-
shamed.
and-
That's the thing, though, in the world that I come out of.
Here's the problem. It's people get a little bit of wisdom and they become dangerous with it. And
Oh, okay.
so you see, okay, the NASB. Oh man, it's the most accurate word for word. We can prove this. If you're not reading the NASPA,
You're not reading the real Bible.
you're not reading the Bible. And when you get that kind of attitude in the Spirit, that is not the Spirit of God.
Mm-hmm.
That is not the Holy Spirit leading you to tell these people that. I guarantee it. Now, if they're reading something that is just totally, if they're reading
Like Jehovah's Witness.
if they're reading the LeBron James Bible that's referring everything to like about Christ as basketball, all right, I might say, all right, probably shouldn't.
Or more
read
in
that one.
real world, like Thomas Jefferson, where he sharpied out parts he didn't like, or
Right.
cut out parts he didn't like,
Right.
or
Or
there's other-
again, like the Book of Mormon, like
Yeah.
that is not scripture. Like I'm going to speak out against that. Now that's
Right.
different. But to speak out against something as like the Message Bible, I would say, don't look at it as a study Bible.
Nope.
Do your research to find out what translation you are reading, and find out where. I would recommend that you fall in something that's more thought for thought or word for word translation. That's where you should be at. The paraphrase, that's nice if you want to take it and use it side by side with another scriptural Bible that gives you a better understanding of actually what it's saying.
And that's why, that's why I was like the NIV, I'm kind of like I don't want to do, if you get the 1982 version, which I actually have, or I think it's 82 or 84, something like that. That's a good one. But the modern one, like they take some interpretive liberties that I'm like, I wouldn't quite go that way. But at the end of the day, I'm like, does that change who Jesus is? Does that change the message of the gospel? Does that change how we actually outwork? Like, that's the question we have to have.
Here's the thing.
But I'm glad we're being safe in terms of what can we do to truly follow after God. But I think we almost put Bible translations up on an pedestal,
No, I don't think we do that.
No?
I think it's with little is given, little is required.
Okay.
Much is given, much is required. Okay? So you're a new Christian. You don't know much, all right? You're drinking spiritual milk, as Paul would put it. So your understanding is going to be a little bit different. But as you grow in the faith, you should want to learn the ways of the culture back then better. You want to dig into this because it's a thirst for knowledge of God, to understand who God is. It's like, I was listening to this Jewish rabbi talk because I was looking at what he considered to be the most accurate Tanakh, which a Tanakh is the Old Testament. It's the way you say it in Hebrew. But that's how the rabbis always call it. They call it the Tanakh. You have to read the Tanakh.
The growl.
I just like doing the
like Hesed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hesed. Yeah, I do it pretty well.
I'm just listening because I'm like,
yeah. But, he said that it's, how do you understand God if you don't understand the way he worded things, how he worded things, how important those words are, and the culture in which he said those words. And so to me, as I would say well-read Christian, like that's where I'm at in my journey, is I thirst more for wanting to study the culture behind it, and what the real scriptures are. I want to be able to read Hebrew. I want to read it in its original tongue. And he said something that really grabbed me, and it's not going to grab everybody, but it was like, oh, that is so cool. It's like, God gave all these scriptures, inspired all these scriptures to people who spoke Hebrew. So wouldn't you want to read it in the Hebrew tongue in which it was given?
It's an Eastern book written for Eastern people. Yeah.
Well, it's written for Gentiles too. The New Testament is written for Gentiles too. There's a lot of
But they're
reference
still
to
not Western Americans.
Well, they turn into Western.
That's true. That's true.
And to say that it's just meant for them would
Hebrew.
almost say that would almost cross the line. At least in my mind, it would almost cross the line and be like, and I can hear certain people that I've come across say this. It's a Western, this Western Christianity thing. So it was written for Eastern people. We'll never understand it. That's why it's not the inerrant word of God for us Western Christians. And to me,
that's an excuse to get away.
That's bordering the line of heresy.
Yeah.
So I want to be careful saying that it was written for Eastern people, because that's almost limiting God, saying he did not have the foreknowledge to know that we sitting here tonight.
But you still got to know the background context.
But you want to know the culture in which it was spoken in. But for a new believer, or even a believer, a high school student, they may not have that type of interest or that thirst right now, and that's okay. And if God leads them to have that thirst, that's great. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. That's no big deal. That's why he leads people like me, like you, these with these teacher type hearts, where we want to teach people. And he gives us that thirst. So we do the research and we do the legwork. Not that you should be lazy and not do the legwork, but that we do the legwork so we can help.
Right.
And then you should be fact-checking us. It's easier to fact-check than to study.
It's true.
So that's just my opinion on it. Anyways, I've rambled on long enough. So that's my
that's cool.
That's my final thought. Mark, what's your final thought?
The best way to study the Bible is with the study Bible. I think that's the easiest one to trust. So like for me, like I use the ancient faith one mainly just because I love seeing what people said like in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th centuries is just super cool to me. Most people don't have that fascination, which I know I'm weird. It's okay.
I have the fascination with the Jewish people.
So there you go. There you go. But it's the two study Bible. I mean, there are so many study Bibles been written over the years.
Oh yeah. And just about every version too.
100%. But the two that I really like are the CSB study Bibles and the ESV study Bibles. In terms of the notes on the bottom, I think those are some of the best ones out there.
I really got to show you my NLT because it's like half or a third of a page of scripture, and the rest of it is commentary and notes.
Yep.
It's so cool.
That's the way. I mean, I don't have them written. I have the digital version of those.
But that's the way I like it too. I'm with you on the study Bibles.
Because you want to read it. And okay, so what does this mean? And not just for what is it saying, but what does it mean? How do I apply it? So if you want to get a good Bible, get one of them big old study Bibles that you can literally like frying pan hit somebody with.
Them big old thick Bibles.
Them thick with a few C's, if you know what I'm talking about. A few whatever.
Anyways.
Thick with 2 C's. But yeah, dude, but to close it out with even my thoughts too, like we just touched the surface on about 1,000 different topics. But I would say about 2 podcasts, if you're a hardcore podcast listener to look into, is our buddies over at Christ Culture and Coffee. We'll put the link in the show notes. One of them actually just took on a teaching position about New Testament studies. So it's a phenomenal deep dive. The other one is Bible Project. The Bible Project is a wonderful podcast to listen to. And so don't just sit here and think, okay, that's cool. Like again, we didn't even scratch the surface of the scratch and sniff sticker that's on the package.
We took 100,000 foot view. Usually we do 30,000 foot. We took 100,000 foot view on this one.
But at the end of the day, what Bible should you read? Though, honestly, one you got on your shelf is crack it open and start reading.
Yeah, it's better to read that than nothing.
Exactly. I love it, man. I love it. We definitely hit 45 minutes for that conversation.
Yeah,
but
sorry.
We can't end the podcast, though, just by a conversation, because that's not fun.
No.
That's not fun at all.
No. Such a delay.
Time for Fun Facts with Fuller.
I love it.
Your kids are so
Every
cute.
time it makes
I hit
me
the button
smile.
twice, so that's delayed. But Fuller, you got a fun fact for us tonight, my dude.
When don't I have a fun fact for us? That's why she says it's time
Never.
for. That's why Piper said that.
It's a segue, but I have not seen this one yet, dude.
You haven't seen this one or the next one.
Or the next one.
Which is
It's
great.
a wonderful surprise. What you got for us tonight, bro?
Mark and listeners, did you know copper doorknobs are self-disinfecting? In the time of COVID, this is a very important thing to know.
Okay.
All right, so copper and its alloys, such as brass, have long been popular materials for manufacturing doorknobs. It turns out this may not just be because the metal's hue and it makes it look nice. In fact, the material has been found to kill bacteria. According to one study from the National College of Kathmandu in Nepal, the metal ions denture protein of the target cells by binding the reactive groups, resulting in the precipitation and inactivation. Basically, what that's saying is the ions, the proteins, target the bacterial cells, and they kill them. They inactivate them. They neutralize them.
That's actually really fascinating.
So you better switch all your doorknobs over to copper or to brass.
So what I'm hearing is copper's like the original Norwex.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Brass is like the original Lysol.
The original Lysol that kills COVID. So if you're struggling, how do we get rid of COVID in this house? Switch all your doorknobs.
Everything, just coat yourself in brass.
Which do you know how much that costs? Like, isn't brass crazy expensive?
Brass is not as expensive as copper. Copper's expensive.
Crazy expensive. Okay.
But, go dip yourself in some molten. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
It's a molten copper.
Molten copper.
To make sure to get rid of the COVID.
Right. But
Aunt Rona can't touch you with cover.
Coat your house in copper, and then you don't have to worry about it.
That's crazy, dude. That's absolutely
But that's
crazy.
why they do those self-healing copper bracelets.
The copper bracelets. That actually
is kind of a. I mean, I don't think it works as well as they say, and a lot of it's spiritualism.
Yeah, it is what it is.
With your aura, but yeah,
with
anyways.
the aura and the crystals or whatever. But either way, we are so glad you joined us again for RCC. You can hit us anytime, and not anywhere, but most places like Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to reach out to Twitter, we'll get that notification. Email us, realtalkchristianpodcast@gmail.com. The website, hopefully right now, will be live. Hopefully by this point it'll be.
I would think so, yeah.
realtalkchristianpodcast.com. But they can always call us or text us at.
One of these days you're going to learn
I don't know it.
574-400-5352.
One more time.
574-400-5352. Reach out to us with either a phone call or text. I know this is the texting age, so shoot us a text.
I love it, man. But hey, until next time,
take it easy.